My name is Ranger Lucas Herndon. I'm from Aroostook County, Maine, northern country, where the winters bury towns and the woods press in tighter every year. For more than 3 decades, I walked those forests. I tracked moose through fresh snow. I pulled lost hunters back to their trucks. I carried bodies out when rescue turned to recovery. I thought I understood the woods. I thought I knew their rules. But the case of Stephanie Dameron taught me the woods don't follow our rules at all. They say she was 14, small for her age, dark-haired. She lived in New Sweden, a quiet town where everyone knows who left their porch light on at night. On September 17, 2024, after an argument with her sister, she stepped outside. No jacket, no flashlight. She walked toward the tree line as if she knew where she was going. Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. She was never seen again. Now, I've worked dozens of disappearances. Most end the same: lost trail, hypothermia, wildlife. But not this one. This one broke the pattern. Because when the search began, dogs, volunteers, helicopters, the forest gave us nothing back. Not one footprint that led anywhere. Not one torn piece of clothing. Not one shout answered. The woods swallowed Stephanie, and then it closed its mouth. I've read the reports. I've spoken to the rangers who were there, men I trust with my life. They told me what they saw, what they heard. One ranger, 30 years in service, swore the air changed that night. He said, the forest went quiet like it was listening. That silence shook him more than anything else. And when a man like that tells you he felt watched, you believe him. Witnesses from nearby farms claimed they saw lights. Not flashlights, not headlights. Pale orbs that drifted low between the trees. Some said they moved in pairs, circling each other, gliding where no trail exists. Neighbors thought they were rescue crews at first, but the search coordinators logged every lantern, every beam. The lights didn't match. They never belonged to us. And then there were the sounds. Searchers heard a girl's voice, faint, echoing across the hardwoods. Not screaming, not crying, just calling a single word. Stephanie. The locals know those woods. They know what it feels like when a place is wrong. A mother told me her dog froze one night on West Road, the same stretch Stephanie walked down. Hackles raised, ears pinned, staring into the timber as if something stood there, just out of sight. She said the dog whimpered and dragged her home. That was the last time she walked that road after dark. Stephanie's family held vigils. The town gathered. Candles flickered. They prayed for answers. But the forest stayed silent. No one came forward. No confession. No body. Just whispers. Just gaps in the story big enough to swallow a girl whole. And I know this much. A place that can hide one child without trace can hide many more. I've been a ranger my whole life, and I will tell you something most of us only say off record. The woods are not empty. They never were. People convince themselves it's all trees and shadows, that there's nothing waiting between the pines. But when I stand in those places, where the air shifts, where the quiet presses against your skull, I know better. I know something else walks there, something we don't talk about in daylight. This story isn't about folklore. It isn't about myths or the campfire tales you hear from drunk hunters. This is about a girl who vanished into the same trails I've patrolled since I was young. This is about claw marks that don't belong to animals we recognize. This is about lights moving where no human should be. And if you think Stephanie is the only one, you haven't been paying attention. You're watching MindFuel. Subscribe now because the deeper we go, the stranger this story gets. And if you've ever stepped off the trail in the deep woods, you already know. The trees are never the only ones watching. The woods keep their secrets. But tonight, we open the first page. 3 days into the search for Stephanie Dameron, I followed a side trail that bent north through a ravine. The canopy closed over so tight, Even daylight barely touched the ground. That's where I saw it. A campsite, fresh, too fresh. The fire was still burning, flames licking the edges of split logs. Food sat half-eaten in tin plates, beans, bread, coffee still steaming as though its owner had stepped away only seconds before. Clothes were folded neatly on a camp chair, boots set just beside it. The tent flap hung open, lantern glowing inside. Whoever had stayed there hadn't packed up, hadn't wandered far. They were simply gone. I called out. My voice carried down the hollow, echoing back to me. No answer. I circled the site twice, checked for tracks. No drag marks, no signs of struggle, no blood. Just absence. As if the people who sat here a moment earlier had dissolved into thin air. Then I saw the notebook. It lay on the stump beside the fire pit, half soaked from dew, pages curling at the corners. I opened it, careful not to smear the ink. The handwriting was jagged, rushed, letters pressed deep into the paper. It read, "It's circling us, but it's not on two legs anymore." I stopped reading. The words blurred as I listened. The woods were too quiet, save for the crack of firewood collapsing in the pit. Then I froze. Another snap. Closer this time. Something heavy moving just beyond the tree line, pacing, testing the ground. My hand went to my radio, but static hissed, no signal carrying through. Sound. Low, guttural growl, barely audible beneath the wind. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't any animal I've ever logged in these woods. The growl carried weight, a depth that pressed against my chest. I stepped back toward the fire, eyes scanning the tree line. The flames flickered, and for a moment I thought I saw movement, something lowering itself, crawling low between the trunks. I whispered into the recorder. The camp is intact. No sign of them, but something's still here. Then the growl shifted into a slow exhale, almost human. There was a hiker, a local man named Aaron, who used the northern trails almost every weekend. He told me something that still keeps me awake. He said the woods never let him walk alone. He'd feel it first as a rhythm, his boots pressing into the soil, and right beside him, out of view, hidden in the timber, another set falling in time with his own. Perfectly measured, never rushing ahead, never falling behind, always parallel. At first he dismissed it. Echoes, maybe. Imagination. But the pattern never broke. Mile after mile, he could feel it there, pacing. He told me, I knew it wasn't in my head because when I stopped, it stopped. When I moved, it moved. Like it was studying me, not following, studying. For months, he ignored it, pretended it was just the forest playing tricks, until one late afternoon in October. Leaves dry, the sun bleeding orange through the canopy. He decided he'd test it. He lengthened his stride, deliberate, dragging his heels. The sound mirrored him, step for step. He quickened his pace. So did it. His heartbeat pounded against his ribs as he slowed again, halting mid-trail. Silence. That was when he made his mistake. He tried to match it. He set his boots down in rhythm with whatever paced beside him, daring it to reveal itself. And in that stillness, when the last echo should have died, he heard breathing. Not his own. He swore the sound came from the trees themselves. A low inhale, ragged, pulling air through something that wasn't lungs. And then an exhale, his exact breath, fed back to him just a second delayed. Aaron said he froze, staring into the tree line, waiting for movement. There was none. Just his own breathing, answered, repeated, like the forest itself had become a mirror. He told me he ran then, faster than he'd ever moved, and still he swore he could hear it alongside him, every stride, every ragged gasp of air, until he reached the road. He never hiked those woods again. His last words to me were, "It wanted me to know it was there. That's all. It wanted me to know. I interviewed a fire lookout once, a man named David who worked a tower on the edge of the Katahdin timberlands. He spent his nights high above the treetops, the forest stretching endless in every direction. Alone, with nothing but radio static and the scrape of branches against the tower. He told me about one night, 2 a.m. The moon was thin, clouds dragging across it. He was half asleep in his chair when he heard it, his mother's voice. It floated up from the base of the tower, clear, unmistakable. She called his name the same way she had when he was a boy, soft, beckoning. "David, open up. I need you." He froze. His mother had been gone for 3 years. He thought he was dreaming until the call came again. Louder this time, closer, as if she were standing just beneath the hatch. "David, it's me. Please let me in." He sat with his hand on the latch, heart hammering, ready to pull it open. His mind told him it couldn't be real, but his chest ached with the sound of her voice. Every memory of her rushed back, the way she tucked him in, the way she called him for supper. He said the sound was so perfect it broke him. He wanted to believe. Then, the voice changed. It slipped mid-sentence, dropping into something guttural, low, like words being dragged across gravel. "We're hungry." David said the air in the tower went dead cold. The boards under his feet creaked as if something heavy pressed against the ladder. He stumbled back, flashlight trembling in his hand, and shined it out the hatch. Nothing. Just the endless black of the treetops swaying. But the voice came again, deeper now, stretched into something almost animal. "Hungry." That's when he slammed the hatch shut, bolted it, and sat in the corner of the tower with his rifle across his lap until dawn. He didn't sleep. He barely breathed. When the sun came up, the ground beneath the ladder was bare. No prints. No sign anyone had ever been there. He resigned at the end of that season. Told me flat out, "The forest learns your grief. It knows what you miss. And then it calls to you." There was a deputy assigned to assist during the early search for Stephanie Dameron. His name was Holloway, a man who'd worked dozens of missing person cases. He thought he'd seen it all, until that night in the timber. It was close to midnight when his spotlight cut across a clearing. That's when he saw it. A child, small frame, draped in white, standing just at the tree line. He shouted, thinking it was Stephanie, thinking she had wandered out at last. But the figure bolted, slipping into the trees. He gave chase. He told me he expected to hear running, branches snapping, breath breaking, leaves scattering underfoot. But there was nothing. Not a single sound. Only the sight of pale fabric darting between the trunks, gliding faster than his own boots could carry him. He pushed harder, lungs burning, flashlight beam shaking. The figure stayed ahead, always just close enough to keep him going, always just out of reach. Finally, it stopped. He swung the light up, panting, heart pounding in his ears. The child stood there between two birches, head tilted, face half-shadowed. For the first time he saw its features, and it smiled. Not the smile of relief, not the smile of a lost child found, but a grin stretched wrong, too wide. The corners of its mouth reaching back, tearing at the shape of a human face. Holloway froze. He said he couldn't move, couldn't speak. He just held the beam steady as that mouth kept opening, wider, wider, until it was nothing but a black hollow. That's when his radio flared to life, static, sharp, glitching. His own voice came back over the channel, his voice, panting, whispering, "I'm right behind it. I'm right behind it." But he wasn't speaking. His lips were shut. The transmission warped, cutting in and out, words twisting into garbled tones until the line went dead. When backup reached him, Holloway was alone, shaking, pale, his flashlight still pointed at empty trees. He swore the child in white had been there. He swore the chase was real. But there were no prints, no fabric caught on bark, no sign of anyone running through that clearing. The report ends mid-sentence. the audio glitching into silence. There was a group of 3 canoeists, locals who knew the waterways better than most. They were paddling the Aroostook River at dusk when fog began to creep low across the surface. They told me the river turned strange that night. Sound carried wrong, the current seemed slower, as if the water itself held its breath. That's when they saw him. A man. Waist deep in the river, no boat, no gear, no motion. Just standing in the current. His clothes were dark, heavy with water, his arms slack at his sides. The current tugged at him, but he didn't resist, didn't brace. He simply stood, as though rooted to the riverbed. The canoeists slowed, calling out, "Hey, you all right? Do you need help?" No answer. No movement. Not even a blink. They drifted closer, uneasy. The figure remained fixed, chest rising so faintly they wondered if he was breathing at all. One of them swore the water around his legs wasn't rippling like it should, as though the river flowed around him. Then, as they passed within 10 yards, the man's head turned. Not a glance, not a shift of shoulders. His body remained locked forward, but his head rotated slowly, smoothly, past 90 degrees, past what bone and sinew should allow, until his face was staring directly at them. The canoeists said his eyes were pale, like river stones, mouth slack, water sliding from his lips. They paddled hard, panic seizing them, trying to put distance between themselves and that gaze. The man never followed, never stepped forward, but the sound came all the same. Splashing. Not the gentle slap of their paddles. Something heavier, closer, like limbs striking the water in pursuit. The noise followed them for miles, keeping pace though they never saw him again. Every time they slowed, the splashing closed in, rising, frantic, like something thrashing against the current. By the time they reached the dock, their arms were numb, lungs seared with cold air. The river was still behind them, calm, empty. But the sound, those crashes in the water, echoed in their ears long after they staggered ashore. One of them told me, it wasn't a man surviving the river. It was the river wearing the shape of a man. It was after a late-season rain, when part of a hillside gave way along an old logging road. Mud, stone, roots torn bare. A ranger, Matthews, was sent to inspect the slide. What he heard there never left him. He told me the soil spoke. At first it was a murmur, faint and muffled, like a crowd carrying through walls. He pressed his ear to the damp earth, thinking maybe trapped water, maybe air shifting under pressure. But no, it was words. Distorted, fragmented, yet human enough to twist his stomach. He swore he could make out his name whispered beneath the ground. Matthews called for backup. Together they dug. Shovels clanged against softened clay, until the soil gave way into voids that should not have been there. Tunnels, narrow, weaving through the hillside like veins. The walls were raw with claw marks, grooves deep and uneven, as if something far stronger than hands had carved its way through. The tunnels carried air cold as a cellar, and with it came the smell. Wet iron, rot, a sweetness that turned the stomach. They found no bones, no remains, only claw-scarred paths vanishing into blackness. Night came before they could mark the site proper. The rangers set camp just uphill, uneasy, shovels stacked, their gear stowed. Matthews said he barely closed his eyes when the sound began again. Voices, not beneath the soil now, but crawling through it, pressing against the earth around them. Words too garbled to repeat, swelling until the dirt seemed to vibrate. Then came the dragging. He heard his pack slide across the ground, slow, deliberate, toward the edge of the site. He scrambled out of his tent, flashlight cutting across camp. And there it was, his gear vanishing over the rim of the landslide, as if the earth itself had reached up and claimed it. They rushed to recover what they could, but the ground shifted under their boots, the soil sucking, collapsing in places as though hands beneath were pulling. Shouts rang out, flashlights darting, but nothing was ever seen, only the final vanish of canvas, metal, rope into the tunnels below. By dawn, the voices were gone, the tunnels silent, but the claw marks remained. Matthews filed his report, short, uneasy. He wrote one final line before signing off. The ground here isn't dead. There was a poacher who came forward long after the searches quieted down. He didn't want his name tied to the report, said the woods already knew too much about him. But his story was logged, and I heard it from his own mouth. He said he used to slip out past midnight, rifle on his shoulder, chasing deer when no one was watching. He knew it was illegal. He didn't care. Until one night, the deer found him. He told me he was tracking fresh prints through a thicket when his flashlight caught movement above. Not ahead, not beside, above. The beam lifted, and that's when he saw it. Deer carcasses, 3 of them, hung high in the branches, swaying gently as though placed there with care. Their bodies torn open, ribs spread like cages, hooves dangling loose. He said the smell hit first, then the detail that froze him. The faces were gone, cleanly removed. No eyes, no snout, no jaw, just skin stretched smooth where features should have been. He swore no predator in these woods works that way. No cougar climbs 30 feet and strings its prey like trophies. No bear peels the face and leaves the rest to rot. He left that night shaken, stumbling through brush, swearing never to speak of it. But the forest wasn't finished with him. 2 nights later, he returned to the same ridge. Against his own judgment, he had to see if what he'd found was still there. The trees were empty. No carcasses, no blood, no trace. As though the forest had erased its own crime. That's when he heard it. Laughter. Not the laugh of a friend. Not a child's giggle. Human, but wrong. Too thin, too sharp, drifting through the pines like smoke. It came from the direction of the kill site, and it didn't stop. He said it followed him all the way back to his truck, weaving between the trunks, keeping pace with every terrified step. Every time he slowed, the laughter grew closer, until he swore he could feel breath against his neck. He never poached again, never stepped into that part of the forest. His final words to me were simple, but I'll never forget them. He said, "Those woods don't hunt deer. They hunt us." The deer were just warnings. I was given access to a journal I was never supposed to see. A confiscated ranger log, pulled from circulation, stamped classified. The cover was torn, water warped, corners blackened with ash. The handwriting inside was jagged, ink pressed deep as though the man who wrote it wanted the words carved into history. The first entry read, "Sector 9 is theirs. Do not patrol alone." No explanation, no date, just a warning left plain and raw. Further down, another line. "If you hear them whisper your name, do not answer." I traced the words with my thumb, imagining the man who wrote them. A ranger like me, trained, hardened, a man who'd spent years calling through trees for the lost. And here he was, begging future eyes to never respond, to let the voices echo unanswered. But the entry that froze me was buried 3 pages later, half smudged with rain, but clear enough to read. "Burn the bodies. They don't stay down." I read it twice, 3 times. The meaning wouldn't shift. The forest was claiming people, and whatever came back out of it wasn't what had gone in. The journal ended abruptly. The last lines were scrawled at the bottom of a nearly blank page, written sideways as if the writer was rushing, pressed for time. "It moves with the trees. We don't belong here. None of us do." No signature, no closure, just silence after the final word. That log was pulled from circulation, sealed, buried in an archive. And yet here it was, in my hands, a voice from a ranger who saw too much. When I close my eyes, I can still hear his pen scratching those words, can still feel the weight of every warning etched into that book. Because I know he wasn't writing for himself. He was writing for whoever came after. For us. Voice 1, trembling. I swear it looked like my brother. Same jacket, same walk. But my brother's been gone for 5 years. Voice 2, Rangers whisper. They don't just stalk you, they think. They wait. They plan. Voice 3, a deputy breaking on static. The trail was clear when I entered, but when I turned around it was gone. Every step back took me deeper. Voice 4, hiker, breathless. It knew my name. It called me like my mother used to, but she's buried in Aberdeen. Voice 5, desperate. Don't look at their faces. They're not faces anymore. Voice 6, cracked, fading into static. They learn. Every time we go in, they learn more about us. The woods are not empty. They never were. They're waiting for you to step off the trail.